Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of the anime Erased on Netflix. And I really enjoyed this anime. I heard some good things about it, and I saw that it would popped up on Netflix. Now, I had also seen that they did a live action adaptation. I'm like, I kind of want to see the anime first. So that's been on there a while, and I really enjoyed this anime. Now, I do have some issues with it, but overall, I like that it went into a kind of murder mystery kind of whole thing. And even though time travel's involved, it doesn't get too much in the way of the plot and what's kind of going on. Now, granted, if it's not really that in depthly explained, it's more of a soft kind of time travel instead of hard where there's like a lot of rules or anything. They kind of introduce it, tell you the rules, and then almost immediately throw you into a situation that completely kind of goes against those rules. It's kind of strange. Those aspects I'm like, what? But the characters and the overall plot and the mystery pretty much carries this thing. Now, granted, since it is a murder mystery, most likely you could pretty much start to peg who the main killer is as everything's going on, but it's a good journey to kind of get there. It's like, oh, okay, this is done pretty well within those realms. So we start off and we see we're following this 29-year-old dude, as Satoru, as he's doing his usual kind of stuff. He's trying to be a manga artist, and evidently, like when he was in elementary school in 1988, this is set like 2006. There was like three kidnappings and murders that had occurred, and this had profoundly affected him, and he can't really do his drawings that well because they want to see more of like who he is, and he's kind of like messed up from that whole kind of experience. Now he doesn't even really remember all of the stuff that occurred there, but he knows that a lot of weird things went on. That, of course, the girls disappeared, and it was pinned on this one dude that he had hung out with, who he called Yuki. And he was just this kind of older dude who worked at his father's kind of like grocery kind of place. And he had a stutter and everything, and he liked to mess with like paper model planes. And he would just talk to people and talk to children and everything like that, and was a generally nice kind of dude, but they pinned the murders on him, and even on death row, he'd be proclaiming his innocence. Well, the thing is, as we're going through the story, we see that this kind of thing has been going on a lot around the area. It's like, that's kind of freaking weird. So we're in the present day, and we see that Satoru is also working at a pizza place where he's got this coworker, Irie, who kind of talks to him, and he doesn't really get a connection with her, but he's like, he's doing his thing. He goes out to deliver pizza, she goes out to deliver one too. And we then get introduced to his time power, revival that he calls it. And we see that something weird's about to go on, and then he sees this butterfly, and then he goes back in like 1 to 5 minutes. That's what we get the beginning limits of this power are. And he's able to kind of stop this truck, and he gets injured, and every time he like does stuff with this power, most of the time he kind of gets screwed over with it. So we'll have to see kind of how that pans out through the series. We only see that he went into the hospital, and then Irie's the only person that kind of came to him at the hospital, kind of visit him. But he gets back home and he sees his mom there, pretty much trying to help and kind of take care of him. But we learned that she was kind of a reporter and everything. We don't know what she's doing now, but she's kind of a weird witch woman in his own terms, because we get a lot of his inner monologue going through, and it switches between like different kind of time periods as well. So we get like his older voice when he goes back in time as well. It's interesting, and I kind of like that portion of it at least. But they go out and they're doing some stuff, and he gets a revival thing going on. He's like, what the hell? He's like, Mom, do you kind of sense anything around? They like look around, and they kind of stop a kidnapping by accident because his mom's focused on this one dude who's not carrying, but like walking along with this little girl, eating an ice cream cone. Well, he gets in a car and leaves the girl there, and she's able to kind of get the stuff going. Talks to one of her older acquaintances, but she is left at Satoru's house alone, his apartment alone, and then suddenly someone comes in, stabs her, and kills her. Of course, Satoru bops in. It's like, ah, shit, my mom's dead. Of course, one of the neighbors are like, ah, he fucking killed her. It's like, Jesus Christ, that's a fucking leap hand and a hope. Because, granted, I understand that seeing someone on the floor with blood on their hands is kind of a weird kind of thing. But you don't see any weapon. And usually when somebody's killing someone, they don't kind of do their kind of thing and be like, I'm kind of freaked out right now. And they'd kind of book it, you know what I mean? They'd make as small amount of a scene as possible, unless that's their whole kind of objective. And this one was just kind of like, okay, they called the police. He kind of is freaking out and tries to run from them and gets revivaled back to 1988. So he's deciding, I have my 28-year-old mind. Let's kind of try and screw this shit up and try and save all these people. Now, his first attempt is a kind of mixed bag. He tries to make friends with the girl Kaio and tries to do it on his own, but he's not able to shift everything that he needs to. He gets some things changed up, and we get kind of some ideas of, are there certain things that are locked as constants? What's kind of going on here? You know what I mean? Like, certain things are variable, but certain things are constants, and certain things have to play out the way that they do. That, unfortunately, is not explored. We see that he gets flashes of deja vu where he is essentially going still along the same timelines that's going on that leads up to the disappearances and the deaths of these children. But they happen in a slight variation way. It's still going at its constant, but instead of red boots, somebody would be wearing blue boots. That doesn't happen in the anime, but that's a kind of explanation. It's like an example that would happen. It's like, okay, he did go to this museum kind of place, but instead of being alone and running into Kaio, he went there as a date with Kaio. And I enjoy the relationship that we see Satoru building up with Kaio. It doesn't feel overly hammy or overly cheesy. It does feel like an organic, the fuck is this kid doing with me right now? Kaio's initial reaction is like, what the fuck are you doing? I can tell through your fake bullshit, because evidently he faked it until he kind of made it with his friends. But we can see that his friends are kind of catching on, mainly his friend of Kenya. He's kind of cool, and I wish a little bit more stuff had been explored with him, though they kind of make up for it when they get him in the future. But he is unable to stop the disappearance. He freaks out. He sees Kaio's mom, who is a complete and utter shitbag, tossing out her shit, and he freaks out and then suddenly gets back into the present. Never really explained why he's back into the present, even though he did make certain changes. It's really kind of weird that he would come back to the same kind of present. And it's mainly my whole issue with the time travel portion of this. I would almost have really wanted it to just been set in the 1980s and have a kid trying to deal with a murder mystery and trying to find the killer and stop the killer before they kill you. I think the time travel portion kind of convolutes it a little bit too much. So he's kind of freaking out. Irie, of course, tries to help him and everything. He does get in contact with the person that his mom was trying to get in contact with. Of course, one of her old reporter friends, looking through all the stuff of trying to figure out who the killer would be. But we find out that the killer does scope out Irie and tries to burn down her house. But of course, Satoru is able to go and help her out. And even the manager pops up, but he's being kind of a dill hole. Tries to turn the dude in twice. And they're able to get her out to safety. She's safe and all that. And he does check in with her. She wants to meet him underneath the bridge that they had met with. And the thing is, she believes that he didn't kill his mom. Now, granted, she only spent about a small amount of time with him, but she could pretty much tell that she's been working with this dude long enough, and seeing the relationship that they had together, that was like, yeah, I don't think that dude would fucking do that shit. Yeah, it just would be some kind of break that is not really accurately explained. He could have took a kitchen knife and just stabbed her, and then for some reason took her phone, even though nobody can find her phone because the killer took it. Ugh. So we're all trying to figure out what's going on, and he, of course, pretty much gets trapped because the police are able to catch him, but he's able to see the killer's there, and then for some reason he's able to activate his revival by shouting "Go back," which makes no sense. It's like, all right, fine, the plot demands that this shit happens. Cool, go back so that way we can actually start doing some interesting shit. So we do. So he goes back and he kind of shakes it up a little bit more. He does get some more help from his friends, and especially Kenya. Kenya really wants to help him out and has understood the change in him since he's a fucking 29-year-old doing this shit. And he kind of gets closer to Kaio and all that. They actually have the same birthday. They have a joint birthday party and everything, and it works out well. And his plan this time is to pretty much change up things as much as possible. He kidnaps Kaio to make sure that she gets protected from her mom so that way she doesn't get beat up and put into this shed. Because evidently that was at the point the killer would take her to some kind of locker place, squirt water on her so that way she freezes faster, and then takes her back to the shed. And then, of course, she would be found later on dumped in some pretty much garbage kind of place and then found after the snow melts. But the thing is, he was doing these different kind of plans because in the beginning timeline, she was killed when she was 10, the others were 11. And one of Satoru's friends, Hiromi, was killed mainly because he looked like a girl, and also to throw off the whole different kind of thing of, okay, this serial killer only goes after little girls. So he starts planning these things out. He's like, all right, as long as I get Kaio past the 10th, get her into being 11 years old, and then kind of deal with this, we'll be good. And we see the different kind of changes going on. Specifically, we see as his friends help him, even though they're not overtly like helping, like doing some kind of weird thing. Kenya helps him figure out certain kind of things. We see that they kidnap her and put her in a bus. But the thing is, we find that the killer had been kind of using that as a base of operations, but does not see her while she's in there, which is kind of like, all right. And we figure out that it is a grown person, but it is not Yuki, and it is a male. So we're like, all right, figuring it out. Now, granted, in the beginning, I was like, let's see, who would it be? I had vibes on the teacher from the get-go because he is the closest physical description of the person that we've seen in the future. Now, granted, people could also change their hair and everything. I also had the idea that potentially the Kenya could have been the one that did it and had become a crazy-ass fiend dude. But I was correct in the end. As they're getting through certain things, we see that the teacher does help him out with Kaio, bringing in services, and then eventually the grandmother to kind of diffuse the situation, have Kaio go with the grandmother, leave. He then turns his attention to a girl that goes to another school that is another potential victim, trying to figure out what's going on. He actually gets picked up by his mom because she bought a lot of shit, and then, of course, his teacher drives them home, and he accidentally opens up the glove box and sees all this candy. I'm like, that looks like bait candy. And he plays it off as like, oh yeah, I found my stash. I quit smoking and candy is the only thing that fucking does it for me. Help me get rid of all this. And it's a good comedic moment, but I'm like, that doesn't feel right. So we see that Aya, is it Aya? Yes. Aya, who was the other one, pretty much gets brought into the fold by one of the other cadre of friends group dude. He's like, yeah, this secret hideout's pretty awesome, and that somehow gets her there. She's reading like Lear and shit. It's like, yeah, you guys are like so immature. I'm like, Jesus Christ, we're in elementary school. What the fuck is going on with you? And it's also kind of funny because the dude's like, you're a 29-year-old. Don't get into this shit. And it's just really fucking funny. But that pretty much starts moving along that route. He pretty much keeps Hiromi under a pretty good thing. Then the next person he tries to help out is Misato. she pretty much had tried to pawn off Kaio as being a thief because kids can be assholes too, and people are assholes, and Satoru's like, hey, fuck you. Now, granted, he didn't say that in school. He did the elementary school equivalent of pretty much shaking her down while she's doing it, and this kind of like isolates her, and he's trying to like go for that. But we see that she went to this hockey game. The teacher that is there, Yashiro, and we see that Misato goes off. He's like then waiting out for her because she's in the bathroom. What the hell? And then he thinks that Yuki's dad has taken her, so he goes off with his teacher, but we find out that the teacher is the killer, and that he took this thing. He had pretty much given a laxative to Misato, and was like, you've been like foiling all my plans, and I need to do this whole void thing, because he had remembered this speech that Yashiro had given in the first timeline, in the for the sixth grade graduation after the deaths of all these kids, and he's like, yeah, and I need to kill, and you have pretty much cockblocked me, so I'm gonna kill you. Fuck you, man. And we do get this explanation of like, he was a kid, and he fucking took some hamsters that this girl had, and she's like, I got all these hamsters, I don't know what to do with them. So he takes them, puts them in a fucking jug of water, and one of them survived, and fit with this whole kind of like Buddha story of where this one dude's in hell, but he had saved a spider, so Buddha's like, I'm gonna give you a line, and gives him a spider string, and he's like climbing up, but all these other people are trying to climb up, so he's trying to stop him, and then he gets like shut down, and evidently he could then see spider strings over people, and he would use that to do his targeting. Now, it sounds batshit insane, and that he then went after Satoru because he had the same kind of thing, but at least we had motivations of the killer. And even though I felt that it was a little bit later on in the series to kind of get that, but we did have the balancing act of everything going between different timelines and all that. So he drives Satoru out, pretty much puts him into a spot where he can't get out of the car, and says like, you were like psychic or whatnot, so I'm gonna kill you, man. And he gets driven into a lake, and he's like, I know your future, and we think that he dies, but he doesn't. He pretty much gets in a coma for 15 years instead of the 18 years, so it's like 2003, and he's able to wake up. His mom has like been working out his body all over the years and everything, and has been taking care of him. It's like, wow, that's really nice of her, and definitely something she would do. And he pretty much goes through the process of rehabilitation, makes friends with this other little girl who's got cancer as he's working himself back up. His friends visit, but we hear that mostly it is his younger voice in his head because he doesn't have his memories. And granted, you would feel kind of bad because we see that Kaio comes by and that she got married to one of his friends and has a baby and all that, and I wasn't really sad because this is kind of like, he missed all those years, and that really sucks. But he also has the other years that he had, getting to be 29, so once he gets those kind of memories back, he misses out in one sense but doesn't in another. Which is kind of weird because, of course, when you enter in the time traveling aspect, you always have to be careful how that works. You'll either work from the case of, if you make these changes, the timeline that worked before is splintered off and you don't have those memories or anything. Or you work from the point of, this dude potentially has the ability of, like Steins Gate, like quantum superposition, where he's able to start to figure out multiple different timelines except center himself in one timeline. It's really kind of weird, but those are the questions that pop up when you introduce this kind of time traveling aspect. So evidently he touches the baby and that gets his memories back because the plot demanded that he get his memories back. I almost would have just bought, just for some odd inexplicable reason, he saw something that would have jogged his memory, rather than he pretty much touched hands with a baby and then got his memories back. It's just fucking weird. But we see that has occurred, and that Mr. Yashiro pops up He's like, hey, but you don't remember me. I'm a city councilman now. And he, of course, plays dumb. And we see him pretty much trying to figure out what's going on. He pretty much lays his trap, takes him up to the building, and we see that Satoru was able to talk to his friends and lay out a plan, and he's able to screw him over. And they did the reveal pretty well. I'm just like, okay, that works out pretty well. I didn't feel like it was much of an ass pull as like the memory thing. Like he talks to his friends. Like one of his friends became a doctor to help him out, and one of them became a lawyer. Kenya became a lawyer. I'm like, you guys are fucking great. Of course, statute of limitations are screwed on the murders, but they're able to get his ass for attempted murder with like Satoru because he's taking him up there. He's like, oh, okay, you put it so that way I'd pretty much be accidentally killing that little girl and that I flung myself off. So, well, the thing is, we learned that he has not killed anyone since Satoru went into a coma, and that the reason is Satoru is the only one who sees him for who he really is. He's like, yes, even to the point where Satoru pretty much tries to roll himself off of a ledge and kill himself, but the dude, Yashiro's like, no, you're right. All right, then we'll die together, pretty much. But we see that there's a thing underneath there, and he gets caught by his friends and everything, and then they arrest Mr. Yashiro and everything for attempted murder and all that. I'm like, okay, that worked out pretty well. And the thing is, I don't feel that this is particularly a clean victory. Granted, a lot of people be like, this is such a happy ending. He caught the killer and everything. I mean, he had to live through a timeline where he failed in that, and he carried that guilt forever. He then fucked up in one timeline, and then in this last one, he got in a fucking coma for 15 years, and then had to, like, reacquaint his body, reconfigure all of his memories, and then make up for lost time with his friends and everything, which was pretty nice as we see everybody get together and everything. He even got it worked out with Misato, where she was evidently helping to raise funds for his hospital stay and everything like that in the beginning. He got into his manga career, got anime and stuff like that. It was really kind of cool because he was able to actually express himself better, which was pretty nice. Certain one of his friends was doing like chef, another one was like dealing with wood and whatnot. I was like, okay, kind of cool. They kind of get shafted. Satoru's the main fleshed out one in the group, and then Kenya's the second one. So I wish that like any of the other ones were, but I mean we've only got 12 episodes. And then finally, at an unspecified time, after he said that like he hadn't had a revival episode since, which means this is probably the fixed timeline where he doesn't need that. He does see the butterfly that leads him to this version's Irie. Now, I can kind of get that, but she was like 17 and he was like 29 and shit. Still in high school in like the beginning one. And I'm like, alright, how old is she here? What time is it here? Where are we now? Because he wakes up in like 2003 and I'm like, alright, what the fuck is he doing? Did he have to go to college? Did he have to finish elementary school? Granted, I understand that those aren't that important. I don't need a fucking episode devoted to motherfucking old ass dude goes to elementary school. I kind of just wouldn't like, yeah, they were able to accelerate his ass to that certain shit. Or it's like, I got all these memories from them shit that I already did it. Okay. And I'm like, alright, because that's a fucking consequence of time travel and what everything has occurred. So he like went for a walk and he was able to like get near the bridge place that they had met before, and they pretty much click. And I'm like, it's made to believe that they go through and probably get their own relationship, which is kind of like fucking weird. I'm like, alright, I just needed more information because I'm just like, that's kind of weird, especially when he went back and he's in elementary school and I'm like, I'm not doing that shit. I'm 29, what the fuck, man? Which would be fucking weird if I went back into elementary school and I'm just like, what? One, I'd be freaked out, but I wouldn't be like, Jesus Christ. Just even thinking of those possibilities of like, how would you get people to invest in certain things? Like, dude, fucking Google. Apples. Why are you talking about apples, you fool? And what the fuck's a Google? That kind of shit. Oh. That would have been an interesting kind of little tidbit if he had like actually messed around with that kind of stuff. Granted, he had bigger things to deal with, but again, you introduce time travel aspect. You kind of explore those things. But granted, I understand that the plot was more concerned with the whole murder mystery, and I liked that aspect. And I just think that the time traveling aspect just fucked with it too much. I don't mind a murder mystery. You kind of convolute it with the rest of this stuff, and I understand you're trying to make your own kind of mark with it, but do that with characters, do that with setting, do that with world and lore building and all that. Like, have a weird way that the person is murdering people and all that that really sticks with them. So that's my biggest kind of negative of the whole time travel aspect, and it's not even really that big. I would highly recommend watching this anime because the characters are interesting, that are focused on, and any characters that are like not as delved into aren't that problematic and aren't that cardboard cutout. My only issue is they have potential, they should have been invested in more. I hit more on potential than on just completely bad shit, because I think that that's usually a worse kind of problem of, if you have potential with something and don't go for it, that's worse than having like a really horrible shitty character that's just like, oh god. But that's just how I usually go and how I feel when I go reviewing through certain things, because I'm like, you could have hit here. But overall, I would really recommend this. Now, granted, I would not do this for children because it's about children getting murdered and there's blood and guts and death. Well, not guts, blood more loosely. It stays more in the blood realm and everything, and bruises and child beatings. Fuck that shit. Fuck her mom. Her bitch. So yeah, don't do that. But otherwise, I would highly recommend this because the characters and the whole journey to get there, it's pretty interesting. And any negatives are just like, you could have been better. More than, holy shit, this was a complete waste of time. I felt that my time was respected and that the journey that got through for this anime was very well done. So if you're into murder mysteries and everything, definitely recommend. If you're into some characters and their development, definitely would recommend. The art style works out pretty well too. I like how it's done and how it just works out pretty well. Even though it doesn't get any kind of like crazy action scenes or anything like that, it doesn't go too crazy or too stylistically. It fits with what is going on in the story and the characters, and it's just really nice to look at. So those are my opinions on the anime. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you like it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.